They laughed when I fell. My own grandchildren standing there with their phones out, whispering behind their perfect teeth. I can still hear the sound of their laughter mixed with the crack of my hip hitting the marble floor. That sound haunts me more than the pain ever did. It was the sound of betrayal. Light, careless, cruel. I remember lying there, half-conscious, staring up at the chandelier I'd bought with my late husband 50 years ago, while my granddaughter whispered she should really stop pretending she can do things by herself. They thought I didn't hear, but I did. I heard every word, and I remembered. It's strange how pain can wake you up. For months after George died, I drifted through the house like a ghost, too tired to care, too numb to fight. My family said they were helping. My son Michael took over the finances. My daughter-in-law Claire moved me downstairs because, as she put it, stairs are dangerous at your age. My grandchildren. Oh, how they loved to visit then, taking selfies in my garden, using my dining table for their little influencer brunches, and telling me to stay in my room so my walker wouldn't ruin the aesthetic. They made me feel like an inconvenience in my own home. And still, I tried to smile. I told myself they were young. They didn't understand what it meant to grow old, to lose the person who knew every part of you. But that day, the day I fell, something inside me broke and then hardened. I saw the truth in their faces, not love, not respect, just impatience, greed, and a strange kind of disgust reserved for things that have outlived their purpose. I remember waking up in the hospital. The nurse was kind, a young woman named Sarah with tired eyes. She helped me sit up, fixed my blanket, and told me my family had left right after the ambulance arrived. They said they'd come back later, she said softly. They didn't. 3 days passed before Michael showed up, phone in hand, more interested in his messages than in my swollen leg. "Mom, you really scared everyone," he said, as if I'd staged my own fall for attention. Then came the real reason for his visit. "Claire thinks it might be best if you move into assisted living for a while, just until you're stronger." I laughed, a dry, brittle sound that even surprised me. "And what about my house?" I asked. He hesitated for exactly 2 seconds. "We'll take care of it. You don't have to worry about a thing." That's when I understood. They weren't worried about me. They were circling the property like vultures. My house, the one George built brick by brick after the war, the one we paid off with 40 years of night shifts and sacrifices, had become a prize they were already planning to split. When they wheeled me out of the hospital, Claire handed me a clipboard. "Just some paperwork for the insurance, Mom," she said. My hands trembled as I signed. I was still on painkillers, my mind foggy, but I noticed the second page later. Temporary power of attorney. My son had forged a future for me without asking what I wanted. I spent that night in the guest room of their fancy suburban house, listening to them argue about whether to list my home immediately or wait until after the holidays so it sells better. That was the night I started planning my revenge. I wasn't angry, not in the way people think. It was something colder, quieter, a realization that love without respect isn't love at all. It's ownership. They thought I was weak, confused, helpless. What they didn't know was that I still had the one thing they could never fake: memory. I remembered every bill, every account number, every secret George and I had tucked away for rainy days, and we'd had many rainy days. My son believed he was my only heir. He didn't know about the trust fund George set up after his stroke, the one managed by an old friend named Leonard Brooks, a man my family never bothered to meet because he wasn't their kind of people. Leonard had been my husband's lawyer and fishing buddy, a quiet man who knew loyalty when he saw it. The next morning, while Claire filmed her daily lifestyle vlog, I asked her if I could borrow her iPad to watch church services. She smiled sweetly and handed it over. She had no idea that an old woman could still navigate technology when motivated by fury. I wrote an email to Leonard right there at the kitchen island, hiding it behind a tab titled Prayer Videos. I told him everything about the fall, the papers, the talk of assisted living. I asked for one thing: secrecy. That night, I overheard Claire on the phone with her mother. She's too stubborn. We'll wait until she's in the facility. Then we can handle the sale. Mike says the market's hot. The words, the sale, echoed in my chest. My house wasn't just walls. It was where George had carved our initials into the oak banister, where my babies took their first steps, where I buried my youth and built a life. No, I wasn't giving that away for their new Tesla or their kitchen remodel. 2 weeks later, I returned home for a visit. They thought I was just nostalgic. They let me wander through the house while the realtor snapped photos for the online listing. Every corner smelled of cleaning products instead of cinnamon and soap. My garden had been trimmed to death, the bird feeder gone. "Minimalism sells," Claire said proudly. I smiled and nodded. Inside, I wanted to scream. That evening, I sat in George's old recliner, the one they'd pushed into a corner to make space for their modern furniture, and I whispered, "Don't worry, love. I'll fix this." Because somewhere deep inside, I could feel him still watching, waiting for me to stand up for both of us. 2 days later, Leonard called. "I've set things in motion, Joe," he said. "They won't see it coming." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "Nothing," he replied. "Just play along for a little while longer. Let them think they're winning." And that's exactly what I did. I signed whatever papers they gave me, smiled when they showed me brochures for fancy senior homes, and even thanked them for taking such good care of me. Inside, I kept count of their lies, their impatience, the moments they forgot I was listening. I let them underestimate me, the way people always underestimate the elderly. They forget we've survived wars, losses, heartbreaks. They forget that experience sharpens you in ways youth never can. By Christmas, they'd moved most of my furniture into storage. "To declutter," Claire said. My grandchildren came for dinner, scrolling through their phones between bites. When I dropped a spoon, it clattered on the tile, and they snickered again. "Careful, Grandma," my grandson joked. "Don't break another bone." The room erupted in laughter. Even Michael smiled, embarrassed but silent. I stared at them one by one, my family, my blood, and thought, "You will remember this moment someday, and you will regret it." Because I already knew something they didn't. The sale they were rushing, the paperwork they'd forged, the house they thought they'd soon own. Leonard had quietly changed the deed 3 weeks earlier. It no longer belonged to me. It belonged to someone else entirely. Someone they would meet sooner than they ever imagined. And on the day of my funeral, when they gathered to mourn the woman they'd dismissed and humiliate her one last time with fake tears, that's when they'd discover who truly held the power in this family. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what happened before that. The months that turned an old, broken woman into something far more dangerous. A grandmother with nothing left to lose. I wish I could tell you that my plan was simple, that revenge came easily, like flipping a light switch. But it wasn't like that. It was slow, deliberate, like sewing a quilt out of torn fabric. Every stitch was a memory, every knot a wound I refused to let fester. After Christmas, my son told me the nursing home paperwork was almost ready. He said it like he was talking about a vacation booking, not exile. "It's a really nice place, Mom," he said while checking his watch. "They've got an activities calendar, group dinners, everything." I stared at the glossy brochure he handed me. Smiling old people playing bingo, a lake with ducks, cheerful staff with perfect teeth. It looked more like a commercial than a home. "You'll love it," Claire added, sipping her green juice. "It's just better for everyone. You'll be safer and we'll have space for the remodel." Space. That's what I had become. Something taking up too much of it. I nodded politely, pretending to read. My mind was elsewhere, replaying Leonard's voice over the phone 2 nights earlier. "I found something interesting in your husband's old papers," he'd said. "George had updated the will before he died. It names you as primary owner of all assets, with a transfer clause." I didn't understand at first. "Transfer clause?" I repeated. "To whom?" "To the trust, Joe. It means if anyone tries to sell or transfer your property without your consent, it automatically moves into the foundation's name, the Eleanor Fund." The Eleanor Fund. I'd almost forgotten. George named it after our first daughter, the one we lost when she was 6. That fund was meant for scholarships, small-town aid, quiet good. I'd always thought it was just a dream he never finished setting up, but Leonard had finished it. And now, that foundation owned my house. "Technically," he said, "your son and daughter-in-law can't sell what isn't yours anymore. They just don't know it yet." I remember smiling for the first time in months, a thin, secret smile. That week, I started preparing my performance. Every liar loves an audience, and my family was no exception. They wanted the fragile, grateful old woman who needed their protection, so I gave them her. I shuffled slower. I let my hands tremble. I mispronounced my pills when they asked what I was taking. I told Claire I kept forgetting what day it was. She smiled that smug little smile of hers and patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll handle everything." Exactly what I wanted her to say. By February, the house listing had gone live. I saw it by accident. Well, that's what they thought. I'd found the open tab on Michael's laptop when he left it charging at the kitchen counter. There it was. Charming, historic property with modern upgrades. Perfect for investors. Market value, $1.6 million. My house, my walls, my garden, my history. Up for sale to strangers. I didn't confront him, not yet. I needed them comfortable, confident, unguarded. So when Claire suggested a family dinner to celebrate new beginnings, I offered to cook. "Oh, Mom, that's really not necessary," she said. "We'll order catering." But I insisted. "Let me feel useful," I said with a sweet, shaky smile. They had no idea what I'd slipped into their wine that night. Nothing dangerous, of course. Just a mild laxative. Something to keep them occupied long enough for me to search through the filing cabinet in Michael's office. Old habits die hard. I'd spent decades keeping our family finances organized. I found everything in 15 minutes. The loan documents, the fake signatures, the listing contract, the power of attorney I'd supposedly approved. All signed with my name. Shaky, but not mine. Claire's handwriting was too round, too precise. She had always underestimated how sharp my eyes still were. I scanned everything with the little pocket printer Leonard had sent me. He'd called it my spy kit. I smiled thinking of George. He would have loved this. "Always wanted you to have some fun, Joe," he'd say. And oh, I was having fun now. The next morning, Leonard called again. "The papers are filed. You're covered legally. But Joe..." His voice softened. "You know they'll come after you when they realize what's happened." "I know," I said quietly. "Let them." For the next few weeks, I played the part of the doting, oblivious grandmother. I asked about their work, their lives, their diets. My grandson, Ethan, bragged about his new crypto project. "It's gonna make millions, Grandma," he said. I nodded. "Oh, I'm sure it will, sweetheart." My granddaughter, Ava, spent her days filming dances for the internet, using my rose garden as her backdrop. She never asked how I was feeling. None of them did. But I was watching. Always watching. Every little cruelty, every dismissive laugh. They went into my notebook. Fell asleep again at dinner. Took photo of me eating soup for TikTok. Asked if my will is up to date. I wasn't writing out of bitterness. I was building evidence. A record of their character for what was coming. One afternoon, while Claire was at her yoga retreat and Michael at work, I slipped into their room. I found the folder labeled Future Plans on her desk. Inside, printed emails from realtors, financial advisors, even a moving company. One line caught my eye, her message to the realtor. "We'll proceed with closing as soon as the property transfer clears from probate. Shouldn't be long. My husband's mother is frail and confused. Frail and confused. That's what she wrote about me. I put everything back exactly as I found it. But inside, I made a promise. If they wanted to see frail and confused, I'd give them that. And so much more. That weekend, I invited my family to Sunday lunch. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, apple pie, my specialty. While they laughed in the dining room, I excused myself, saying I needed to rest. Upstairs, I opened my husband's old lockbox and took out a letter sealed in brown paper. His handwriting across the front read, "For Joe, when the time comes." I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten note and a single line that made me catch my breath. If they ever forget who built this home, remind them what legacy really means. Beneath the note was a bank statement, dated 15 years ago, showing a transfer of $480,000 to the Eleanor Fund. George had known. He'd seen what might happen long before I did. He'd given me the weapon I needed. That night, after everyone left, I called Leonard again. "It's time," I said. "You're sure?" "Yes, they think they own my life. It's time they see what I've been building instead." He chuckled softly. "Then I'll arrange the signing ceremony for March 5th. The board of the Eleanor Fund would be honored to meet you." I hung up and sat in the dark living room, staring at the family photos on the wall. My family, my legacy, my disappointment. I thought about forgiveness. For a brief moment, I wondered if I was being cruel, but then I remembered Christmas, the laughter, the way they'd looked at me like a relic. No, this wasn't cruelty. This was balance. March 5th came like any other Tuesday. Claire reminded me my move-in date for the senior home was that Friday. "We'll help you pack," she said cheerfully. "You'll love it there." I smiled. "I'm sure I will." That afternoon, Leonard picked me up in his old Lincoln. We drove to the downtown office building that bore a brass plaque, the Eleanor Foundation for Education and Community Care. Inside, 5 people waited, men and women in suits, kind eyes, quiet dignity. The board. Leonard handed me a pen. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "it's an honor. You're signing over the trust officially. The house will remain under the Foundation's protection permanently. Any sale or transfer will require your personal signature and yours alone. Upon your passing, proceeds go to scholarships for young women in need." I signed slowly, my hand trembling, but not from weakness, from purpose. When we left, I asked Leonard one question. "What will happen if my son tries to sell it now?" He smiled. "He'll find out very quickly that his mother is smarter than all of them combined." I didn't have to wait long. 2 weeks later, I woke up to shouting in the hallway, Claire's voice shrill and panicked. "What do you mean we can't close the sale?" Then Michael's desperate and angry. "There's a legal block, something about a charitable trust. How the hell did this happen?" I stayed in bed, pretending to sleep. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. They thought they'd trapped me. But I had built a trap of my own, and it was only the beginning. The day they discovered what I'd done was the day the house finally felt alive again. I could hear them from my upstairs window. Michael pacing in the driveway, phone pressed to his ear, Claire shouting into the speakerphone at some poor real estate agent. "There has to be a mistake," she kept saying. "This property is under my husband's family estate. We already have an accepted offer." I smiled to myself and sipped my tea, the same way I used to when George came home from work and told me he'd won a hard case. The jasmine smelled like victory. An hour later, the door burst open. "Mom," Michael said, his face flushed. "Did you sign something? With a lawyer or a foundation or something called Eleanor?" I looked at him over my glasses, calm as a nun in prayer. "Of course I did, dear. Your father and I founded it together. It helps young women pay for college. You knew that." "I didn't know you gave them the house." His voice cracked on the word house, like a child who dropped his favorite toy. I set my cup down. "Oh, Michael, I didn't give it to them. I entrusted it. That's different. You can't sell what belongs to the public good." Claire's heels clicked across the floor as she stormed in behind him, her perfume filling the air like poison. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're being manipulated. That lawyer, what's his name, Leonard? He's taking advantage of you." "Oh, no," I said sweetly. "Leonard is an old friend. We built the foundation with your father's money, not yours." Her face twisted. "You're senile, Joe. You don't even know what you've done." That's when I laughed, not loud, but deep and low, the kind of laugh that comes from years of swallowing hurt. "Oh, my dear, if there's one thing I've learned from living 81 years, it's exactly what I'm doing." She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised my hand. "Do you know what senility looks like, Claire? It's forgetting your children's birthdays. It's not knowing your husband's face. It's mistaking strangers for family. But I remember everything. I remember the night you mocked my walking. I remember the day you emptied my cupboards because you didn't like the smell of old things. I remember the way you looked at me when I fell. That look, the one that said, 'Finally.'" The silence that followed was heavy as stone. Then I added softly, "And I remember the sound of your laughter. I can still hear it when I close my eyes." Claire tried to recover, smoothing her blouse, forcing a smile. "You're just upset. We were trying to help you, Joe. You can't stay in this big house alone." "I won't be alone," I said, standing up slowly. My cane clicked against the tile. "The foundation is hiring 2 scholarship recipients to live here as caretakers while they attend the community college. They move in next month." Their faces were priceless, mouths open, color draining. "You're letting strangers move into our family home?" Michael shouted. "Our family home?" I repeated. "Funny, I didn't see family when I was in the hospital. I saw empty chairs." Claire grabbed his arm. "We'll fight this," she said. "We'll take it to court." I smiled again. "You do that, but the foundation's lawyers have already filed a notice of charitable ownership. The judge will laugh you out of the building." They stormed out, slamming the door so hard a picture frame rattled loose and fell to the floor. It was one of George's old photographs, him and little Michael on the porch, hammering the first plank when we built the deck. I picked it up carefully and whispered, "Well, love, they finally learned who this house really belongs to." The weeks that followed were quiet but full of whispers. Claire told the neighbors I'd lost my mind. Michael stopped answering my calls. The grandchildren unfollowed me on social media, though I never used it anyway. The world shrank to my house, my garden, my memories. But it wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. Then came the letter from the nursing home. "We regret to inform you that your reservation has been canceled at the request of your next of kin." I laughed until I cried. They still didn't understand. I wasn't moving anywhere. I started preparing the house for the 2 students who would be moving in. Their names were Lily and Carmen, both first-generation college girls from the local high school. When they came to visit for the first time, they walked through the door like it was a cathedral. "Are you sure we can live here?" Carmen whispered. "This place is beautiful." "It's home," I said, "and you'll take care of it. That's all I ask." Watching them reminded me of what love used to look like. Gratitude without greed, joy without entitlement. They cooked dinner with me, helped me plant new roses, filled the rooms with laughter that didn't sting. For the first time since George's death, the house felt warm again. But peace never lasts when people smell money. It started with little things. The doorbell ringing late at night, anonymous letters in my mailbox, printed, unsigned. "You've been misled. Your lawyer is stealing from you. The foundation is under investigation." I ignored them at first. Then one morning, I found tire marks across my flower beds. My favorite statue, the angel George had given me for our 40th anniversary, was smashed to pieces. I didn't have to wonder who did it. When I confronted Michael, he denied it, of course. "Mom, you're being paranoid." But his voice trembled, and I could see the guilt behind his eyes. Claire stood beside him, pretending to comfort him. "You're destroying our family, Joe," she said coldly. "Do you even realize what this looks like?" "I do," I said. "It looks like justice." They left again, and I thought that was the end of it. But a week later, I woke up to find a notice taped to my gate. Property inspection, required by city zoning authority. I called Leonard immediately. "It's fake," he said after checking. "They're trying to scare you." I sighed. Let them try harder. I've been scared of death and pain. Bureaucrats don't frighten me. Still, it rattled me more than I admitted. That night, I sat alone by the window, looking at the moonlight spilling across the garden. I could almost feel George beside me. "Did I go too far?" I whispered. "Did I become one of them?" In my heart, I already knew the answer. No, what I'd done wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity. The kind of dignity no one should have to beg for. 2 months passed. The students moved in, the foundation grew, and my son and his wife disappeared from my life completely. Until one day, a thick white envelope arrived addressed to the estate of Josephine Thompson, my own name. I frowned and tore it open. Inside was a printed email thread between Claire and a funeral home. Dates, arrangements, floral orders. My hands shook. The subject line read, "Final details for Mother's memorial service." They were planning my funeral. At first I thought it was a mistake, some dark joke. But then I saw it. A press release draft attached at the bottom, ready for publication. "Beloved matriarch passes peacefully at 81, survived by her devoted son Michael Thompson and family. Memorial service to be held at St. Augustine Chapel, followed by estate proceedings." Estate proceedings. My lips curled into something between a laugh and a sob. "So that's the plan," I murmured. "Bury me while I'm still breathing." They'd gone too far this time. I called Leonard. "How fast can we act?" "As fast as you need," he said. "What are you planning?" I looked out the window at the roses my girls had planted, the sun spilling gold across the yard. "If they want a funeral," I said, "I'll give them one they'll never forget." Because when the day came, and it would come soon, they'd stand in front of my photograph, crying their fake tears, whispering their rehearsed sympathy speeches. They'd think they'd finally won, and that's when they'd find out who truly ran this family. The day my son buried me, I wore my favorite blue dress, the one George loved. Simple, cotton, with tiny white flowers embroidered along the collar. He used to say it made me look like spring trying to be brave. I wanted it that way, not black or gray, just blue. Life, not mourning. Because unlike everyone in that church, I wasn't dead at all. Of course, they didn't know that. The announcement went out a week before. With heavy hearts, the Thompson family announces the passing of beloved matriarch Josephine Thompson. They posted it online, printed it in the local paper, even sent out invitations to the celebration of her life. The arrogance of it all. They were hosting a memorial for a living woman just to justify selling her house. Claire even called one of my old bridge friends pretending to cry. She passed peacefully in her sleep, she'd said. It was what she wanted. What I wanted. That phrase followed me around for months. What they wanted always disguised as what I wanted. But this time, I was the one writing the script. It started 2 days before the funeral. Leonard and I met at the cafe near the courthouse. He brought the final documents in a brown envelope and laid them gently on the table. "It's all done," he said. "The Eleanor Foundation now officially owns not just the house, but all associated land and bank holdings. You'll remain lifetime trustee, and your son—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Has no legal standing whatsoever." "Perfect," I said. "Now, about Saturday." He hesitated. "Are you sure you want to attend?" "Leonard, how many times in life do we get to watch our own funeral?" He chuckled softly, though his eyes were full of worry. "Just promise me you won't overdo it. You're not exactly invisible around here. If anyone recognizes you—" "Let them," I interrupted. They should see what truth looks like. It's time they saw me. The morning of my funeral, the sky was strangely bright. No clouds, no gloom, just sunshine pouring through the curtains like a spotlight. Lily helped me get ready. I told her I was going to an important family event. She didn't ask questions, but she knew. That girl had more intuition than most adults I knew. She brushed my hair, buttoned my cardigan, and said quietly, "You look like a secret someone's about to tell." Maybe I did. The chapel was packed when I arrived. I sat in the very back, hidden behind a row of lilies so tall they brushed my hat. My son stood near the altar, handsome as ever, tears in his eyes. I might have believed them once, but now I could see the tremor in his hand wasn't grief, it was nerves. Claire hovered beside him, her black dress perfectly fitted, her face set in that calm, performative sadness she'd perfected for her social media followers. My grandchildren sat in the front row, scrolling through their phones, probably recording behind-the-scenes footage of loss. I watched as they eulogized me. Michael began, "Mom was a strong woman." His voice cracked in all the right places. "She gave everything to this family. We'll honor her by continuing the legacy she left behind." The legacy she left behind. I almost laughed out loud. He didn't realize how true that line was, just not in the way he thought. Claire went next. Mom taught us about kindness, about generosity. She always wanted her home to be a place of love and opportunity. That's why we're establishing the Thompson Family Fund, to continue her spirit of giving. My jaw tightened. The Thompson Family Fund, a pale imitation of the Eleanor Fund, the one they'd tried to erase. I turned to Leonard, who was sitting 2 rows ahead. He gave the faintest nod, the signal. Everything was ready. The priest invited everyone to bow their heads for prayer. While they murmured, I slipped quietly out the back door and crossed the street. Leonard had arranged everything at the community center across from the chapel. The timing had to be perfect. When the prayer ended and the guests moved to the reception hall next door, they found something waiting for them. A large projector screen, a banner that read, "In loving memory of Eleanor's legacy," and me. Not in person. Not yet. On video. Leonard had helped me record it a week earlier, sitting in my living room with the morning light spilling across the lace curtains. I'd looked straight into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, it means you thought I was gone. But I'm not. Not yet." The crowd went silent. Someone gasped. I could imagine Claire's face, that frozen half-smile cracking like porcelain. "My dear family," the recording continued, "I wanted to thank you for organizing such a lovely gathering. Truly, it warms my heart to see how quickly you moved on." A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. By now, you've probably realized that the home you tried to sell no longer belongs to you. That's because George and I decided long ago that our legacy wouldn't be greed. It would be grace. The Eleanor Foundation now owns everything. Every brick. Every flower. Every penny. It will fund scholarships for girls who remind me of my younger self. Determined, kind, and unlike some, grateful. I could practically hear Claire's breath hitch. The recording went on. You may also have noticed that the sale you arranged was legally void. That's because you forged my signature on several documents. Don't worry, I've forgiven you. But the police, I can't speak for them. There was an audible murmur then. Gasps, whispers, chairs scraping. Michael's voice shouted from somewhere near the front, "Turn it off," but the video continued, calm, unhurried. "And to my dear son," I said, my eyes soft on the screen, "you once told me I was just old and forgetful. You were half right. I may be old, but I forget nothing. Not the sacrifices, not the laughter, and certainly not the way you looked through me like I was already gone." The image faded to black, replaced by one last sentence in white letters. "Love is not inherited. It is earned." And then As the screen went dark, the back doors of the hall opened, and I walked in. The room froze. Conversations died mid-breath. My cane tapped once, twice, 3 times on the floor. Every head turned. Claire's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered. Michael's face went white as chalk. "Hello, everyone," I said, smiling gently. "Sorry to be late. You know how traffic can be." It was the quietest I had ever seen that family. You could have heard a prayer drop. One of my grandchildren whispered, "Grandma," like they'd seen a ghost. "Not quite," I said, "but close enough, I suppose." Claire stammered first. You can't be here." You're dead?" I finished for her. "Yes, I saw that too. Quite a lovely obituary. You really shouldn't have used that old photo, though. I looked dreadful in that lighting." Laughter rippled through the guests, hesitant at first, then louder as people began to realize what was happening. Michael stepped forward, his voice trembling. "Mom, what is this? Why are you doing this to us?" I met his eyes and felt a flicker of the love I once had for that little boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the yard. "I'm not doing anything to you," I said softly. "You did it to yourselves." Then I turned to the crowd. "I just came to thank you all for coming and to make an announcement. From this day forward, the house at 312 Willow Lane belongs entirely to the Eleanor Foundation. It will serve as housing for students in need. You're welcome to visit anytime, as volunteers." Claire's jaw clenched. "You're humiliating us." I tilted my head. "No, darling. You did that quite well without me." The guests began to whisper, some even clapping awkwardly. My grandchildren looked at their parents with wide eyes. For the first time, I saw doubt flicker across their perfect faces. Maybe they were realizing what kind of people their parents really were. Maybe, just maybe, they'd learn something. Leonard joined me at the front, handing out pamphlets about the foundation. "Thank you all for supporting Eleanor's mission," he said cheerfully. "In lieu of flowers, donations can be made directly to the fund." The irony was almost poetic. My fake funeral turning into a fundraiser for the very charity my family had tried to erase. I stayed only long enough to see Michael leave, dragging Claire by the arm, their pride shredded. When they were gone, I finally exhaled. That night, as I sat by the window of my quiet house, Lily brought me a slice of pie. "You really did it," she said softly. "You won." I smiled at her reflection in the glass. "No, sweetheart, I didn't win. I just stopped losing." Outside, the roses swayed in the night breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. And for the first time in years, I felt George beside me again, proud, amused, whispering, "That's my girl." For a few weeks after the funeral that wasn't, the house was blissfully quiet. The girls laughed in the kitchen, the air smelled of rosemary and warm bread, and for the first time in years, I could walk through the hallways without feeling like a burden. But peace has a way of making you forget that storms don't disappear. They circle back. The first sign came as a letter slid under my front door. No envelope, no stamp. Just a folded sheet of paper with words printed in angry capitals. "You made a fool of us. You'll regret it." I read it twice, then fed it straight into the fire. "You all right, Mrs. Joe?" Carmen asked from the doorway. I smiled, even though my hands were trembling. "Just burning old memories, dear. They make the air smell better." But inside, I knew my son wasn't done with me. Humiliation is a wound that greedy people never let heal. 2 nights later, headlights swept across the windows at midnight. A car idled at the gate, engine humming. I didn't have to look to know whose it was. Michael's silver BMW had a very specific growl. Then a rock hit the porch railing, cracking one of the flower pots. Lily screamed upstairs, and Carmen grabbed her phone. But I just stood by the door, cane in hand, heart steady. Let him rage. Let him see the house he lost, lit up and alive again. The car peeled away a minute later. By morning, Leonard had already called the police, and 2 officers came to take a statement. "We'll keep a watch on the property," one said kindly. But I could see in his eyes he thought it was just family drama. To them, old women's fears don't weigh much. I didn't argue. I'd faced worse things than rocks. A week later, I received a court notice. My son was contesting the deed transfer. Undue influence, it said. Mental incapacity of the donor. I laughed out loud when I read it. The irony, after years of calling me sharp-tongued, controlling, too stubborn. Now I was suddenly senile when it suited them. Leonard met me at the courthouse cafe the next morning. "They're desperate," he said, stirring his coffee. "They think you'll cave if it goes public." "I've been public for 81 years, Leonard. I'm not about to start hiding now." He smiled. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "Not enjoying," I said, "but I am. Remembering how it feels to be seen." The hearing was set for late May. On the day of, I wore that same blue dress again. Ironed perfectly, the collar starched just enough to make me feel like myself. When I walked into the courtroom, heads turned. Claire looked pale, as if she'd seen a ghost again. Michael refused to meet my eyes. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Justice Patel, peered over her glasses. "Mrs. Thompson, your son claims you were manipulated into signing over your property. Do you understand the nature of this hearing?" I smiled. "Perfectly, Your Honor. I also understand the nature of greed." A few chuckles rippled through the courtroom. Even the judge's mouth twitched before she regained composure. Leonard presented everything: the trust documents, the original deed, the letter from George establishing the Eleanor Fund decades earlier. And then, one by one, the scholarship students I'd sponsored came to testify. Carmen spoke first, her voice trembling but clear. "Mrs. Thompson isn't confused. She's the smartest woman I've ever met. She saved me. I wouldn't even be in college without her." Then Lily, softer but firmer, "She taught me how to balance a checkbook and how to make soup from nothing. People think old means fragile. But she's stronger than anyone in this room." By the time they finished, half the audience was crying. When it was my turn, I rose slowly and looked at my son. He wouldn't look back. "Your Honor," I began, "my son says I was influenced. He's right, in a way. I was influenced. By the way they laughed when I fell, by the way they spoke about me like I was furniture, by the silence that followed when I needed them most. That influenced me to protect what I built, not for myself, for others." I turned to Michael then. "You thought I didn't see what you'd become, but I did. Every time you smiled at me and checked your watch, every time you said Mom like it was a chore. You forgot that I taught you how to read contracts before you even learned how to ride a bike." His face crumpled for a second. For a moment, I saw the little boy he used to be. Then the mask came back. When I sat down, the judge cleared her throat. "Mrs. Thompson, your clarity speaks for itself. Case dismissed. The deed stands." It was over. Claire stormed out first, heels clattering like gunfire. Michael followed, shoulders stiff, eyes hollow. Leonard squeezed my hand. "You won." I shook my head. "No, Leonard. I simply refused to lose." That night, I sat by the window again, watching the rain trail down the glass. The house was quiet. The girls had gone to bed, and the air smelled faintly of mint tea and old wood. I thought about George, about Eleanor, about all the years that had led to this moment. My phone buzzed, a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Mom?" Michael's voice, thin and tired. For a long moment, I said nothing. "I just wanted to say—" His voice cracked. "I didn't mean for it to go that far. Claire, she pushed me, and I—" "You signed the papers," I said quietly. "You made the choices." "I know." A pause. "I lost my job, Mom. Claire's leaving. I don't know what to do." The silence between us was a living thing, heavy and breathing. Finally, I said, "Do you remember what your father used to say about mistakes?" He hesitated. "That they're the only lessons you can't cheat on." "Good," I whispered. "Then start learning." "Can I come see you?" he asked. I thought of the broken pots, the fake funeral, the forged signatures. Then I thought of George, who'd always believed in second chances. "Yes," I said, "but not tonight. Tomorrow after church, and don't come empty-handed. Bring those kids of yours. They still have a grandmother, whether they remember it or not." He exhaled, a sound that was half relief, half shame. "Thank you, Mom." After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long while. Rain tapped against the window, steady as a heartbeat. I wasn't sure if forgiveness would come easy, but I knew it would come eventually, because that's what true power is. Not revenge, but the grace to end it. The next morning, the girls and I baked a pie. The smell of cinnamon filled the house. When Michael finally knocked, I didn't rush to the door. I let him wait, just long enough to remember who held the key now. When I opened it, his face was pale, his eyes red. My grandchildren hovered behind him, shy and uncertain. I stepped aside. "Come in," I said. "Let's eat before it gets cold." And as they entered, the house seemed to breathe again. The tension, the anger, the ghosts, all of it faded into the smell of apples and sugar. For the first time in a long, long while, my family sat at my table. Not perfect, not healed, but together. George would have liked that. Still, as I watched them pass plates and whisper apologies, I thought of that day months ago, the marble floor, the laughter, the pain, and I knew one thing for certain: they would never laugh at me again, because now they finally understood who I was. And on the day I truly leave this world, when it's real, when it's time, there will be no forged papers, no fake grief, no lies, only respect, and maybe, if I'm lucky, a house full of flowers instead of whispers. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but sitting there that Sunday afternoon, sunlight pouring through the lace curtains, the table filled with laughter that finally sounded real, I realized something. Revenge wasn't what I'd wanted all along. I just wanted to be seen, to be remembered as more than a nuisance or an inconvenience, to remind them that even a frail old woman still had a spine made of steel. Michael looked smaller than I remembered. His shoulders slumped, his hair streaked with gray I hadn't noticed before. The fire that used to burn in him had dimmed, replaced by exhaustion. He kept glancing at the photographs on the mantel, George in his uniform, little Michael on his first bicycle, me holding Eleanor in a sun hat bigger than her face. I caught him staring at that picture the longest. He wiped his eyes when he thought I wasn't looking. Claire didn't come in at first. She lingered outside, her car engine idling by the curb. When she finally stepped through the door, she had that brittle poise women wear when they know they've lost everything. Her perfume hit me before her words did. "I just came to drop off the kids," she said flatly. "I won't stay long." I gestured toward the table anyway. "You might as well eat. It's apple pie. You used to like that." She hesitated, then sat. For a while, no one spoke. The clinking of forks and the creak of old wood filled the silence. Then Ethan, my oldest grandson, the one who'd once filmed me struggling to get up the stairs for his followers, cleared his throat. "Grandma," he said softly, "I didn't know they were going to do all that, the funeral thing. I swear I didn't." I looked at him. He was barely 20, but his face already carried the guilt of someone twice his age. "And what did you do when they did?" I asked gently. He lowered his eyes. "Nothing." "Then learn from that," I said. "Silence is its own kind of cruelty." Ava, my granddaughter, reached across the table. "We were awful, Grandma. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked. "I didn't realize how much it must have hurt. I thought you were strong enough not to care." I smiled faintly. "I am strong enough. That's why I made you watch." They all stared at me, not sure whether to laugh or cry. "You thought strength meant silence," I said quietly. "That love meant obedience. But real love stands its ground, even when it shakes." For a long time, no one moved. Then Michael reached across the table, his hand trembling as it covered mine. "Mom," he whispered, "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't," I said. "Not all of it. Some things break for good." "But you can stop pretending you didn't break them." He nodded slowly, tears sliding down his cheeks. It was the first honest thing I'd seen from him in years. We spent the afternoon in strange peace. The girls, Lily and Carmen, joined us after their errands, and soon the living room filled with the smell of coffee and the sound of stories. I told them about George's terrible singing, about the time he nearly burned down the shed trying to roast marshmallows. We laughed, all of us, not the cruel laughter of that day I fell, but something lighter, something almost holy. As the sun began to dip, Claire stood to leave. She paused by the doorway, her expression unreadable. "For what it's worth," she said softly, "you were right. About everything." "About family?" I asked. She nodded. "About greed." Then she left, and for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to chase or forgive her. Some lessons aren't mine to teach anymore. The weeks passed. Spring came early that year, the kind of spring that smells like second chances. The roses bloomed bigger than ever. The girls had hung fairy lights on the porch, and every evening the house glowed like a lantern against the dark. I started receiving letters from scholarship students, thank you notes written in crooked handwriting and smudged ink. "Because of you, I can study nursing. Because of you, I can go to college. Because of you, I believe I'm worth something." Sometimes I'd sit by the window reading those letters aloud to George's picture. "You see, love? You were right. The house still saves people." Michael began visiting every Sunday after that. He brought groceries, sometimes flowers from the market. He didn't speak of courtrooms or papers or money anymore. He just sat with me in the garden, trimming the hedges, drinking tea, learning how to be my son again. One evening, he brought something wrapped in newspaper. "Found it at the pawn shop," he said. "Thought you'd want it back." I unwrapped it carefully. It was the angel statue, the one smashed months ago, glued together piece by piece. The wings were cracked, but she was standing again. "She's still beautiful," I said. "So are you," he replied quietly. I didn't cry. I'd spent too many tears already, but something in me softened, a crack that finally healed instead of breaking further. Months later, when the girls graduated, the house was full of life again. Guests, music, the smell of baked bread. The Eleanor Foundation had expanded. 5 girls sponsored, soon to be 10. Leonard retired, but he still called every week to tease me. "You've become the city's favorite ghost, Joe, the woman who rose from her own funeral." I laughed every time he said it, though deep down I knew the truth. It wasn't about rising from death. It was about refusing to let others write my ending. On the anniversary of George's passing, I went to the cemetery alone. The air was cool, the grass damp under my shoes. I laid down a single rose on his stone and whispered, "It's done, my love. They know now." As I stood there, I felt a breeze pass through the trees, soft and warm, like a hand brushing my shoulder. When I got home that night, I found a note pinned to the kitchen board. Lily's handwriting. "Mrs. Joe, we've set up the Eleanor Thompson Scholarship in your name. You changed our lives." For the first time in decades, I felt truly at peace. I sat by the window, the moonlight pouring over the floor like silver water, and whispered to no one in particular, "They laughed when I fell, but they're not laughing now." Then I smiled, not from pride, not from vengeance, but from understanding. Because it was never about making them suffer. It was about reminding them and myself that dignity is a flame no cruelty can extinguish. If I could speak to every forgotten grandmother in the world, I'd tell her this: don't waste your breath begging for kindness from those who've forgotten how to give it. Stand tall, even if your bones ache. Protect what you've built. Leave your mark on this earth so deep that they can't erase you. Not with lies, not with greed, not even with laughter. When I finally leave for real, there won't be a fake obituary. There'll be a house full of roses, scholarships blooming like springtime, and a family that remembers not the frail old woman they once dismissed, but the one who stood back up and taught them what love really costs. And when the light finally fades, I'll go quietly, smiling, because I already know the ending. The house stands, the girls laugh, the family remembers, and somewhere, George is whispering, "You did it, Joe." Yes, I did.